오셔서 반가워요. So what I want you to notice is that the power and clarity and significance that came through these releases was because of listening beyond self to the longing of the whole. Last week also, Eugen spoke about, he said this in English, in the future, there should be increased training for people to listen, releasing self so that they can listen to the longing of the whole. Those of us who joined the consideration of that service on the sanctification call on Tuesday also heard Eugen say, listening beyond self to the longing of the whole is or will be a focal spiritual practice for the future. And I called it a leverage point to transform our lives. So maybe now hearing me say this, you may be thinking, okay, I see this is very important. And you may even be at the point where you could say, I want to do this, but how? So what I want to consider today is some of what we have to move through in order to listen to the longing of the whole. Maybe even just hearing this, you may feel some resistance or fear. For example, like this thought, if I release myself and really listen to the longing of the whole, will I lose myself? It's a legitimate question, but in actual fact, it's just the opposite. Listening to the longing of the whole is the fast track to discover your true self. Now, those who participated in the recent LTW discovered something of it. There was a session called Letting Being or Letting God Speak Through You. And they had really quite a magical experience in that session. Listening beyond self, they were able to speak themselves, heaven's message, in a dialogue in the group. If you don't know, LTW is our 4th level seminar. Those in the LTW touched a level of their true being beyond what they had through that session. So there may be yet another fear that would block you from releasing self and listening to the longing of the whole. It might be a thought like this. If I listen to heaven, I won't have time to take care of my problems. Do you ever think of that? Well, if you've been serious about thinking about listening to heaven, that one will come up as a fear. But in fact, you will have time to take care of your problems. Because heaven is actually quite aware of all your problems and is just waiting for you to listen to guide you in the wisest way to handle them. But there may be some yet deeper blocks to listening to the longing of the whole. Because even when you come to the point of growth where you really want to do this, unfulfilled longings within yourself may surface and interfere with your ability to listen beyond yourself. You may feel unreceived parts of yourself crying out to you, leaving you with a feeling of need. Need for acknowledgement or appreciation from other people, need for love from other people, or just need for other people's energy to get you going. So these unreceived parts of ourselves are sometimes our inner child, or they may just be incomplete parts of ourselves that haven't yet fully matured. As you move through the process of awakening, you may begin to see how many of your actions were stirred by your own emotional need, trying in different ways to get love or comfort from other people. Now, it's wonderful to receive love from other people. Even in our seminars, we have sessions that specifically stir the love and surround from others. But as I'm sure you each know, other people are not always ready to give you the love or care that you need when you feel that you need it. So it's really important to learn how to do that for ourselves. Sometimes people feel ashamed of their desire for love, care, acknowledgement from others. So they may try to repress it. That does not work. Because there are vulnerable parts of us that actually do need loving care, especially at certain times. For example, in the early stages of awakening. In my own process of awakening, in my early 20s, many times I went with tears to my mentor. And while I was with him, I felt so much better. But then after I left him, maybe an hour or two later, I didn't remember what he said. Why did I feel better? I felt worse again. But there are also other times when we do need loving care. When we're handling a lot of challenges, or when we're approaching another major identity shift. I hope you all remember that in the first seminar, the Art of Living seminar, we talk about, especially when you start to awaken, you go through many identity shifts. So there are times when we need help from others for this. But in the end, it's we ourselves who must receive the unreceived parts of ourselves. Doing that is the beginning of freedom and maturity. And it can take training to learn how to do that. We use different practices for this, and we hope to teach one of them some Sunday afternoon, hopefully in May, depending on good translators. So, another mistaken approach to listen to the longing of the whole that I want to tell you about from my early 20s, hopefully to save you from making the same mistake. So I was at the stage of beginning to understand how large the shift was from my old self to what I knew would be my true self. And I understood enough to realize it would be a big change in my habits. And I didn't know how to change them. So I was thinking, how can I perceive heaven's message instead of the usual feelings and thoughts that have governed me for so long? So I tried something. And after a few days of trying this particular approach to change my habits, my mentor noticed my strange behavior. And he asked me, "What are you doing?" And I replied, "Well, I'm trying to be guided by heaven by doing only what I don't want to do." He smiled compassionately at me and he said, "Where did you get that idea? Did I ever tell you that was the way to be guided by heaven?" And I said, "No." Tears, but I felt such relief. It wasn't working. So to listen to heaven's message, actually we do have to overcome the wants of our small self. But doing only what you don't want to do is not the approach to discover how to listen to heaven. It doesn't actually remove the block. So, you don't have to try that. I do have a suggestion though. Probably at this stage, what it really is to listen to the longing of heaven is still quite new. So you can start listening to the longing of the whole by beginning to listen to the longing or deep prayer of the largest collective you're connected to. So instead of just listening to your own longing, also tune in to the longing, for example, of your family and friends, or the group that you work with, or even your society and country. You've all heard of John F. Kennedy, the president who deserved to be honored. When he was inaugurated, the speech that he gave in 1961 included words that later became very famous. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Not only does that stimulate a larger perspective in us, but it activates our larger self. Now, some of you have already discovered that through years of service in social activism. Some of our friends in the labor movement, maybe also theater for the public awakening, and more than I could name. So in our network too, at a certain point, it's quite natural that people begin to ask not what 삶의예술 학교 can do for them, but what they can do for 삶의예술 학교, which means Art of Living School for those who don't speak Korean. Now, I want to be very clear. This is very different from ignoring your own needs through duty. Dutifully caring for other people, but not for yourself. Many mothers in Korea have done that and still do it. So this does not mean ignoring your own true needs, because your needs as a human being are part of the whole. And listening to the longing of the whole at times will bring the compulsion to care for yourself. Rest, eat, relax, dung dung dung. Just as you'd offer care to others, care for yourself. Maybe you know the second great commandment, as Jesus called it, the second great commandment. In English, there's a very small two-letter word that's very important. Love others as, A-S, 2 letters, as you love yourself. In other words, we are supposed to love ourselves, just like we love others. When we have received the unreceived parts of ourselves and learned how to do that for ourselves, then we discover that loving ourselves is the same as loving other people. Any conflict or tension about that really just dissolves, because the crying out of the unreceived parts of ourselves is not blocking our listening to the longing of the whole. Actually, the will of heaven is in our best self-interest. The will of heaven is in our best self-interest. Okay. It's only fear that has prevented us from realizing that. But there's an interesting thing to realize. We can't discover the will of heaven by starting with our self-interest, because often we don't really know what is in our best self-interest. If you think about it, perhaps many times in your life, when you looked back, you might have been able to see that the will of heaven, the way life worked out, actually was in your best self-interest. But you couldn't see it at the time. But you couldn't see it back then. So, as we practice ways to expand our perception of the longing of the whole, our perception grows. And in time, we discover the longing of the whole holy earth is the same as the will and longing of heaven. So I want to reference something else that Eugen said last Sunday. He mentioned that the way the breakthrough in LTW came was through the same process of listening to the longing of heaven that was used in writing the March 1st proclamation. And in the session in LTW, when they first experimented with that, I want to describe some of the steps that Eugen led them into the experience. So first, as individuals, he suggested take time and come into attunement with heaven. After that, he suggested they continue in silence, but open their eyes and look into the eyes of one another. And then let an attunement current move through the eyes to one another so that they could come into attunement with each other. And then the third thing, he had them just enjoy patiently listening, like listening to music, for what heaven might want to speak through me. And he said that as they did that, slowly one after another began to express something, but in a little while that experience magnified. And they really had quite a new experience of the wisdom of the whole coming through a body of people together. Collective intelligence. Now, it takes quite a high level of vibration and trust to experience that together in a grouping. So I don't recommend that you try that in a group yet. But somewhat like this on your own, you could practice coming into attunement in stillness and listening for heaven's message. And you may discover how wonderful that stillness is and how much is contained in it. In my own experience, the inspiration and perceptions that come in that stillness are so perfect for my immediate circumstance and offer me rich insights and guidance. Though this may be an unfamiliar practice to some of you, doesn't it sound like a much more delightful way to live? More delightful than struggling, trying to figure out what to do, how to solve your problems, worrying what other people think and feel. Instead of that, why not open to heaven? Isn't it likely to be much wiser and more beautiful than what you'll perceive the other way? Actually, heaven is our true ally. People have for so long been afraid of God because they haven't really understood who God is. And so they have cut themselves off from that vital lifeline. So I suggest you explore this, discover if it's true for yourself. Now, another resistance that you might be thinking, well, that sounds nice, but there are too many negative currents in my life to be able to do this. Actually, what I'm sharing with you this morning, the essence of it, came to me in a burst a morning this week after I had a really bad dream. So, negative currents come to all of us. As I thought about that dream, I realized it was reflecting back to me my concern that I have too much to do this month. So I pondered its message and I realized I need more heaven time. Actually, many times when it seems like we have too much to do, to handle all that effectively, more heaven time helps a lot. So in my case, it was, I don't know, maybe 4:30 in the morning, too early to get up. So I randomly picked from my iPod an audio by Martin, who many of you know, the second leader of what we teach. I couldn't even see what it was. I just picked. And the message was so perfect. To begin to create anything, how we see things is our first creative act. And we can't really accomplish anything in form without seeing clearly as creator. And also maintaining an atmosphere of stillness so that we can Be open to ongoing perception. So with that message that was coming to me through the audio, after I got up, that's just what I did. I took time to come into attunement with heaven. And so much came so quickly. Actually, heaven delights to pour its wisdom and guidance through us because heaven is looking for channels to awaken and uplift humanity. And as we come to the point of committing to serve the whole, we become heaven's channel to uplift the people who love and resonate with us, our tribe we call it, to bless our particular circumstance. As our service grows, which it does seem to be doing, situations likely will become more complex, and at times they will require us to make important choices when we don't have much time to consider them. It could drive our minds crazy if we try the old approach of analyzing options and long discussions. So you can see that the ability to listen to heaven accurately will be vital. So beginning now to develop that ability is the course of wisdom. In the March 1st proclamation, there's one statement that describes this. Change from a life dominated by habits to a life led by heaven. So, to summarize, and also hopefully to make sure you understand, listening to the longing of the whole includes the will of heaven, but also the longing of the earth and true humanity. And as we learn to do this in our daily lives, we don't lose ourselves. We grow into the largeness of who we really are. So that's what I wanted to share. It's based in just the short part that Eugen said in the service last week. But I realized how much difference it makes in people's lives if they really do release self and listen to the longing of the whole. So hopefully by talking about some of the resistance and fear and habits that you need to overcome to do this, it'll make it easier for you to begin exploring this too. It's fun also. Yeah, I keep thinking about Michael's words about the attitude of a loving parent. Yeah, 맞아요. So I also appreciated Eugen touching on this other point of really people who are totally involved with themselves are not very attractive. So I think we've touched today a number of things that hopefully can lay before you a pathway for you to explore this more. Not trying, enjoy, step by step, discovering. And as you do listen to the longing of the whole, as much as you can perceive it, it will transform your life. And as Robert said, is there anything better to do than this? Because this will also transform the world. So, let's enjoy re-establishing that deep alliance. Heaven and earth are meant to be one. Okay, 감사합니다.
Is that okay?